As well as editing clips into sequences, you can also edit sequences into sequences. And when you do that, you get the result of the sequence as if it were a clip, just a piece of media like any other. Whatever you originally choose as your sequence settings, that's what you're going to get as a clip when you nest one sequence inside another. And I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to make a new sequence here just by dragging and dropping a clip onto the new item button here. And in fact, where is my, here it is. Let's call this the master sequence. I'll pull this out. And in fact, while we're here, why don't we make a sequences bin and put those in there just to stay nice and organized. Now, of course, I've got a clip in here I don't need, so I'm going to select that and remove it. And I'm going to go to my sequences bin, I'm just expanding this, and I'm going to grab that mountain race sequence. This one I have here is a very simple sequence, just a few shots cut together. I'm going to drag and drop that straight into my master sequence. And I'm being super lazy here and putting it in the middle of the timeline, but at least you can see what's going on. If I zoom in a little bit, using the plus key on the top of my keyboard, you'll notice that I've now got a single item. I don't have all of these individual clips. I've got a single item. Now, if I wanted the individual clips, if I just zoom out a little bit, there's no reason why I can't go into my mountain race sequence, lasso to select all of these, Control C or Command C to copy, and then move my playhead and press Control V or Command V to paste. I can always do that. That's going to work too. Let's just get rid of those. But when you nest a sequence in this way, it unlocks some very powerful special workflows inside of Adobe Premiere Pro. For example, I can now apply an effect that will be visible right the way across all of this media. Now, to give you an example, if I go to my effects list and choose something simple, I'm going to type in the word color here, and I'm going to make this really obvious. I'm going to get the fast color corrector and throw that on the clip. And then in my effect controls, I'm going to drag down a bit, and let me shrink this part of the window down so I can see the controls a bit better. And I'm just going to make this really blue, so it's really obvious. And notice that everything in that sequence is now seen as blue. However, if I go back to the original mountain race sequence, there's nothing there at all. There's nothing changed because these are the original clips. So far, so simple. But if I make changes to any of this timeline, I'm going to see the results inside the nested sequence. This here, this item is my nested sequence. I'm going to see those changes dynamically. It's going to update live. And let me give you a really simple example. I'm going to go back to the mountain race sequence. I'm going to grab, just deselect, and then grab this shot, the penultimate shot, and put it over at the end of the sequence. So I've got a gap now in the middle, and I've made the sequence longer. If I go back to my master sequence, right away, there it is. You can see there's the gap. Shots before it, there's the gap, and shots after it. Amazing. However, if we look back at the mountain race sequence, I've got another shot here that is missing from the nested sequence. And of course, that's because the nested sequence was created with this duration before I made my mountain race sequence longer. So what I'm going to do is click on the timeline. I'm just going to hover the mouse over the end of the clip and drag to the right. I'm clicking and dragging, and I'm trimming out to the new end of the sequence. And now, there you go. There's the shot. Let me deselect, and you can see I've got that on the timeline. Brilliant. Now, if I go back to the mountain race sequence and I grab this shot again and I put it back where it came from and then go back to my master sequence, I get these diagonal lines. And what these lines are telling me is, okay, you've got a clip segment here on the timeline, but there's actually no media in it. There's nothing there for you to see. So I can trim this back if I like and trim it out to the new maximum duration. And there's my nested sequence back the way it was. Coincidentally, if you get into doing multi-camera edits in Premiere Pro, you'll be doing so using a nested sequence. You just need to stack up your video layers and then right-click, go to multi-camera and choose Enable. And there's some very good workshops on how to do that. There's also a couple of shortcuts for creating nested sequences. Here, for example, in my mountain race sequence, I can just lasso all of these clips, right-click and choose Nest. And when I do this, straight away you'll see a new nested sequence is created in the bin, and the original clips in the timeline have been replaced by that nested sequence. I'll just rename this so you can see it, new nested sequence. There we go. I'll put that in my sequences bin. And if I double click on it to open it, it opens like any other sequence. And here are my clips. Notice though that I've only got one video track and one audio track. And that's because those are the only audio tracks I was using with those clips that I selected to nest. I can also nest inside the bin. If I lasso some clips here or shift select them, I can right click and either choose New Sequence from Clip or Create Multi-Camera Source Sequence. This is the workflow for working on a multicam edit. If I choose New Sequence from Clip, it's pretty straightforward. There's the sequence I've just created, and here are the clips. I suppose technically that's not really nesting, that's just making a sequence, but it is a very quick and convenient way to do it. Let's call that Yet Another Sequence. Okay, I'm going to pull that out of the bin and put that into my sequences bin. So why would you use nested sequences? Well, one reason is this one. You might decide that you need to apply a single effect to multiple clips and be able to adjust the settings. And so nesting those clips is a very, very efficient way of doing it. It means that you then have just one effect to adjust and you can treat all of those clips as being part of the same scene. What you would commonly do is go back to the original sequence. Of course, I've nested that one now, haven't I? You'd go back to the original sequence here and use special effects to make sure all the clips look unified. They all have the same color, they all have the same brightness, so they look like they're meant to fit together. And then when you apply your special effect, it'll have more of a seamless look. And just to illustrate, if I grab this and drag it over to the left, I'm just moving the tab here, so I've got a nice line through which things move. You can see I've got my new nested sequence, that's inside the mountain race sequence, and that's inside the master sequence. If I make any changes, let's drag this clip out again, right over here. You'll see that updates in the mountain race sequence, because here it is, and you'll see again that that updates inside the master sequence. So nested sequences can be inside nested sequences, and again and again and again. It can get pretty complicated, but it doesn't need to. Another reason to nest is that you might have a very, very complicated timeline with lots and lots of tracks, perhaps for an intro title sequence for a 6-part series maybe. And one convenient way to do that is to have a sequence that is your opening titles. And you can just put that into every episode. Every sequence that is an episode of your series, you can use that sequence instead. And then if you need to make changes, you make it once and it'll update inside every episode automatically. So that's nested sequences with Premiere Pro CS6.